Welcome back to Boys in the Zone. It is your host, EJ Savage. And the Cowboys made some moves today before the trade deadline. Finally got over for the NFL season. And they send a seventh round pick. My camera's having a hard time focusing. Anyways, let me try to brush it off a little bit. Okay. Anyways, the Cowboys trade a seventh round pick for Logan Wilson of the Cincinnati Bengals. In other words, the other worst defense in the league, the only comparable defense to the Cowboys defense that is abysmal. But, he's a decently good player. They have him under contract for the next 2 years. Of course, they do have the out after this year. But if they do choose to keep him on for the next 2 years after this year, I think it's like 6 million average cap hit. So not bad. He's a guy that can play the Mike linebacker position, allow Overshown to kind of go in there at the will position and just, read and react instead of trying to read all of what the defense is doing and also get his unit on the same page. He can leave that role up to Logan Wilson. So I do like that move for a seventh round pick. Solid player. Of course, he wanted out of, Cincinnati because of the problems there. He's going to have to deal with a lot of the same problems that he dealt with in Cincinnati over here in Dallas, but overall, a really, really good move by the Joneses. I will admit that. Then the bombshell of a trade right there for Quinnen Williams of the New York Jets, the outstanding defensive tackle, for a 2026 second round pick and a 2027 first round pick. It could be either the Packers or the Cowboys pick there. So we will see. The Cowboys do still have their first two picks in the 2026 draft. However, they do not have a second as a result of this trade, and they do not have a third as a result of the George Pickens trade. So those are some serious things to consider when making this move. However, and I do not know who to attribute this to, so do not quote me on who said this, but from at least one source that I saw, and a reputable source at that, I just don't remember who it was. The Cowboys seem to have always wanted Quinnen Williams even before the Micah Parsons trade went down. In fact, they were on the phones with the New York Jets trying to trade Micah to the Jets for draft capital and Quinnen Williams back. So in a roundabout way, they do get their guy that they always wanted in the first place. Of course, now they have Kenny Clark. Almost said Kenny Smith, Kenny the Jet Smith. But they also have Kenny Clark, which I'm anticipating they're going to try to offload after the season, whether that's an outright cut or trying to trade him to another team that does need a defensive tackle. I seriously doubt they're going to pay 3 defensive tackles on this team, $20 million average per year, with Osa, with Kenny Clark, and now Quinnen Williams. But time will tell. Of course, I'm fully anticipating players like Trayvon Diggs, Terrence Steele, who has been abysmally bad in pass pro this year, and a few other players. I seriously doubt that the safeties are still on this team next year, but they're revamping things and trying to get whatever they can out of this defense this year. But I really think that this is a rebuild for next year because both of these guys are under contract, as I mentioned, and both of them do help you this year, but also in the future, they allow you to have some freedom in what you really have to attack in the draft. I think you do have a player in Donovan Ezeraku who's been flashing more and more the times that he's getting on the field. In pass protection, in pass rushing, Ezeraku looks like he's pretty seasoned thus far. I think that in PFF, he is the second amongst a rookie in pressure rate, only behind Walker, which is relatively surprising for me. But we knew last year had a really solid edge class. Now, I was kind of one of the guys that was like, hey, we have bigger needs on this team. We don't necessarily need an edge, but you had the luxury of being able to take Donovan Ezeraku at your in your second round. That has paid super, super, super off already because one, and I don't know if the Joneses will ever be completely honest about what happened with Michael Parsons, but whether or not they had this in their back of their mind or not, taking Donovan Ezeraku in the second round was the right move because he was the BPA player, but also after you traded Micah, it made it even that much better because this guy has flashed thus far and he has done a really, really good job for a rookie. Now, the sacks have not completely come. That's fine. He only has, what, 2.5 sacks on the season, something like that. However, he's providing pressure on the quarterback where not a lot of defensive ends on this team have. Now, of course, James Houston early on in the season was. Jadeveon Clowney had a really good game. If anybody had a good game, it would have been Jadeveon Clowney and Donovan Azaraku against the Cardinals. But overall, I mean, that back end needs talent. They're devoid of talent, minus Deron Bland. And I know Bland looked horrible against Marvin Harrison Jr. However, Bland is not an outside corner. I'm telling you that right now. You play him on the outside, that's not where he's good at. You play him inside in that nickel slot corner position, I think he's going to be a lot better for you in the future. So I'm not super worried about Bland. Now, however, I will caveat that with saying at his current salary, Bland is getting paid like an outside corner when he's a slot corner, which isn't good. However, you do have the luxury to kind of overpay for a little bit of good players instead of great players when you have familiarity with them, and you just offloaded the Micah contract onto the Packers, or didn't really offload it. Technically, he was still really cheap, and you had power to keep him and franchise tag him in the next 2 years. But it doesn't matter; it's done, and he's out of here. So let's get back into these trade talks though, really quick. And I'm not going to make this a super long video. So if you guys have anything to say about these trades, do leave it in the comment section and I'll try to get to it. But Quinnen Williams is a top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL. Jalen Carter, Dexter Lawrence, Chris Jones, those are really the names that would come up over Quinnen Williams. Perhaps Jeffrey Simmons you could throw in there as well, but really devoid of those names, you have one of the best defensive tackles in the league now. And really, your defensive tackle rotation went from a 0 to hero now. I know Osa has been bad and he's played, his play has been really underwhelming this season. However, the past few years, Osa's been really good. I mean, you look at the numbers, you look at the PFF grades. I know PFF is not everything. I'm not trying to say that it is, but Osa has been really, really good. Now, of course, that is some of the attention going to Micah's side instead of Osa. But even on the double team rates, he had one of the highest pressures, amount of pressures in the league, and the only person actually better than Osa in that same time frame is the guy you traded for in Quinnen Williams. Now, of course, Jalen Carter hasn't counted towards that because he wasn't in the league at that point, but still very, very impressive. Adding Quinnen Williams with Osa Odigizua, which you hope gets more one-on-one opportunities. Excuse me, and Kenny Clark, he's an aging veteran, but he still holds his own in there, and he's still a very good run defender. Kind of underwhelming. I was hoping that he would be a little bit better than what he has been. But, I still believe you have one of the best defensive interior units in the league now. Now, do I think that that's going to be going into 2026, 2027 season? Probably not. Like I mentioned, you probably aren't going to be paying 3 guys at 20 million average per year, that all play the same position. But I will say for this year, at least you hope. And I'm gonna caveat this with Quinnen Williams is in the 98th and 99th percentile in run stuff percentage and runs and what was it? I can't even remember the other stat, but it has to deal with run defense as well. Very, very good at run defense, Quinnen Williams is, and he gives you some in the pass rush as well. Super impressed by that. Sorry, getting a decent amount of notifications here on my phone. Trade from all angles. He will be back on the practice squad. According to Todd Archer, Malik Davis was released, and he will be on the practice squad if he clears waivers, which he probably will. Anyways, the Quinnen Williams signing does a couple different things for you. It allows you to play in that 5-man front that you saw a lot in that Cardinals game, and we will see with what happens in the offseason. I seriously doubt that they're going to play a lot of 3-4 now. after they've been a 4-3 front all year. But we will see. And obviously, Matt Eberflus, I don't see any world that he comes back as the DC after this year. Um, so I'm anticipating that the DC hunt might be um, oriented towards a DC that wants to play a 3-4 front. You think about the pass rushers on this team as well, that could probably fit into that 3-4 front. You're talking about Sam Williams, Donovan Ezeraku, Dante Fowler. We'll see with what happens with him in the future. Um, Marshawn Nealon, of course, doesn't really fit into that, but you can kind of use him as a 3 tech. We'll see, but I think that's a possibility, a real possibility to go to that 3-4 front instead of the 4-3 moving forward. Um, like I mentioned, this is one of the best defensive tackles in the league. So to get him, and I know that the cost for him is a lot. It seems like a lot, especially considering what the Cowboys got back from the Packers, which is only 2 first. Um, man, that's hard. And then Kenny Clark, of course, on top. But you know, you see how important this player was to Jerry Jones. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, they always wanted Quinnen Williams, and now they've got their guy. So they better hope that this guy is a menace in the middle. If he's consistently getting 8 sacks a year at the defensive tackle position, this is a great trade. This is on par with a player of the caliber of Micah Parsons. Now, he's not a player that you're going to move all over the field like a Micah Parsons. He's not twitched up like Micah Parsons, but what he does is he plays really really well from that inside position. He uses kind of a strange stance, but it allows him to get to the quarterback and create pressures, create those tackles for losses. And I truly believe Quentin Williams is going to be very, very good for this team. On the other side of this, Logan Wilson. He's a guy that I mentioned, middle linebacker, allows you to do some other stuff with Overshown. And Overshown, mind you, is a very, very good, I won't say very, very good, but fairly good rush linebacker. So if you want to use him in some pass rush snaps because you have a Logan Wilson that can sit back and you can kind of allow Overshown to be used in pass rush department a little bit more, I like that from that standpoint as well. But specifically to Logan Wilson, he allows you to have a leader in that locker room. He allows you to have a guy that doesn't doesn't just know what he's seeing, but trust it and can actually get there, unlike Jack Sanborn. So for a 7th round pick, this is really a no-brainer for Wilson. I truly think that these two players are going to noticeably, goodness, I can't even talk, noticeably make your defense better moving forward. And that's important because this defense is so bad. However, you've got to factor in the cavalry coming. Overshown, I mentioned. Ravel coming back from injury. We saw some Kalen Carson out there, and he actually probably was the best cornerback that we saw against the Cardinals, which is funny to say because it seemed like he was getting picked on so much last year. But it's a return of the arms for this team. The cavalry is back, hopefully after the bye, and that's exactly what Brian Schottenheimer talked about in the presser, that he hopes that this team will get Overshown and Ravel for the Raiders game. And, you just start to stack some wins. You see what you can do, what you can make. Hopefully, you can make it into the playoffs and just get in there, sneak in there, and make a little bit of noise. That's all it takes. And I think that the Cowboys, here's the good thing about this. I will say this. It makes your defense better for not just this year. I know a lot of fans, and myself included, see the playoffs as a long shot. So it helps you pass this year. That's the first most important thing. Second most important, though, is if you can make a run, and we'll see the extent of Dak's injury with his leg. Who knows how bad that actually is, and if they're keeping this hush hush or whatever. They haven't practiced yet. We'll see if it pops up on the injury report. But right now, you have the offense to compete. You need a defense to at least be serviceable, middle of the pack. That's all I'm asking. And this team will win games that they shouldn't because the offense is so good. I know these last two games have not been good. You played one of the best defenses in the league at home in a tough environment in Denver. And then, goodness gracious, they could not get out of their own way against the Cardinals. How many fumbles did we have in that game? 3 fumbles. How many and we might have had 4 fumbles now that I think about it. We might have had 4 fumbles. Um, 3 fumbles. So the Ferguson one, the Pickens one we got back, the Javonte Williams one that we lost. Is that it? I think that's it, maybe. And then the interception, of course, that was just Dak throwing it down there. But we had 2 turnovers on downs in the red zone, mind you. Like that's leaving at least 6 points off, if not 14, where that's a completely different ball game. That's what I'll say by that. So the offense really could not get out of their way, whether it be penalty, whether it be by the offensive line just not holding up. Walter Nolan was a problem. And for a rookie in his first game to be a problem against your offensive line where the interior is supposed to be the strength is bad. But then you pair that with Josh Sweat doing dirty work to Terrence Steele all night. Goodness. I don't know what you want Dak to do in that situation, truthfully. So, this is the ability to at least hope and pray that you can get stops. And really, you think about this Cowboys defense, if they get 4 stops a game where they don't give up any points, that's so much better than what we're accustomed to seeing during the season. And that's the difference between winning games and losing games, truthfully. Like, imagine how many games we would have won if we would have just been able to stop the opposing team 4, 5 drives out of the, let's say, 10 drives you get in the game. If they can just stop them 4 or 5 times, like that's 50% of the time, under 50% of the time, they're allowing, and I think that I actually saw that 54% of the time, the Dallas Cowboys are allowing points to the opposing team. It's something crazy like that. Um, and you got to think that's factoring in turnovers, that's factoring in teams going for it on 4th down, that factors in, you know, plays where they're just, they're down, they have to throw something at the very end. Like those count as stops, quote unquote. When in reality they just weren't in the position to even continue a long drive, methodical drive, because the time, you got to factor in like the times where the opponents go into halftime and they just kneel it. That counts as a stop on a drive because they didn't score points. So really, they're worse than that. So, adding Logan Wilson, adding Quinnen Williams will help. Adding Overshown will definitely help. Adding Ravel should help. We'll see. He's a rookie. You can't and cornerback. I've often said is one of, if not the second hardest position to play in the NFL, right after quarterback. So, I don't want to throw him out there and expect him to be better, but good God, we've got some bad, bad defensive back play right now from this team, and I don't think it could be much worse. I'll just be honest with that. I don't think it could be much worse. So, right now, the prospects of this team is looking like, hey, we made some moves so that you can't say I'm completely obstinate. You can't say that I'm completely GM illiterate, if that's even a saying for Jerry Jones. But regardless, I'm still critical of Jerry, but he did make some positive trades. And I know a lot of people, and myself included, like I'm a big draft guy. I want to have picks, but picks are dart throws in reality. Like, imagine how many of you guys, not myself, I was on board saying Mozzie's an overdraft, Schoonmaker's an overdraft. But other people in Cowboys Nation that are super optimistic was like, yes, we finally got our defensive tackle. We finally got a tight end that's a difference maker, which he wasn't at Michigan. And obviously Michigan didn't throw at that point in time. They didn't. But When I watch Schoonmaker, and literally, it doesn't take you long to be like, "What?" And like, this guy is a fourth, this guy's like a fourth round grade, like second round. Come on now. So I literally only watched 1.5 games of Schoonmaker at Michigan, and I was like, I don't see it. And I have a philosophy with the tight ends anyways, where I'm like, you've gotta be athletic, where I'm like, okay, that translates to the game even without, 'cause the reality of the college game is there's not a lot of wow numbers for tight ends, at at the college level. They're not getting the targets, they're not getting utilized in the manner that they would in the NFL. And as a result, you have to take that in consideration when you're scouting them. So I look for traits heavily. I look if they can block already. And Schoonmaker was not a bad blocker. I'll go on record as saying that, but I just didn't see him in any department of his game other than blocking, and he's been underwhelming in that department in the NFL. I'll mind, or I'll say that as well. He didn't do anything for me, and so I was just like, second round is crazy. The Mozzie one, I had him as a 2-3 grade, and so many of Cowboys Nation's like, "We need Mozzie, we need Mozzie, he's an athletic freak." He was, he tested like an athletic freak, but guess what? It never translated to the college game. And I know Michigan doesn't use their defensive tackles like that, yada, 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 yada. He had I don't even know if I'm lying on this or I'm just misremembering it. It was either zero point 0.5 sacks or 1.5 sacks in his career at Michigan. It never translated. And so when you're scouting and when you're looking at these things, of course you want context, um, factored into your scouting. However, you cannot let testing numbers be the only reason why you fall in love with a player. Mozzie didn't he wasn't a run stuffer necessarily. Like he was all right. He was serviceable, but he's not a first round grade at defensive tackle. He never showed the flashes as a pass rusher despite his athletic testing, and he was all right as a run stuffer in college. So this is where I'm saying, with the picks that you lost in this Quinnen Williams trade, yes, they seem like a lot, but I'm telling you right now, this team hasn't drafted good of late. I'm just being completely honest. They lucked into Micah Parsons. They thought he was a linebacker. They never saw him as a pass rusher. And if they tell you that, they're just completely lying to your face. And Tyler Smith, they drafted as an offensive tackle, and they had to start him at left guard as um, they had a full um, um, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. They had full anticipation of using him as a guard season 1, but then kicking him outside, um, to be the ultimate successor of Tyron Smith, and that just didn't happen. He's and that's not to say that he couldn't do that, because we've seen him do that in stints where he's hopped out to tackle, but even Tyler Smith, he hasn't really been playing great as of recent. I don't know if he's dealing with some type of injury or what it is, but those are really the only 2 first round grades that I say you've hit on in the past, what is it, 5 years? Now you've had some success and some, yeah, CD has been here for more than 5 years, I believe. Or maybe this is his 5th year. You factor in CD, CD should have never fallen that far down the board. Let's just be completely honest. They lucked into that one as well. Um, so and I do completely believe Tyler Booker is going to be a really really good player moving forward for you. Um, but you've already vested heavily on that defensive line or that offensive line, and I think that the Cowboys have this philosophy of building the trenches, and sometimes that gets them in trouble because they've reached for players that aren't that good. And I know that the league often does this with offensive linemen. They'll be like, he's right on the cusp. We got to just draft him. He might be, 53rd on their board, but they're willing to take him in the first round because they don't think they're going to last to the second. And that mostly is true. But that's what gets the good teams in trouble with drafting, is they feel like they have a position to need and they have to overdraft as a result of that. Instead of saying, and I know not a lot of offensive linemen are going to be moved. There's not a lot of offensive line trades. So Perhaps this philosophy doesn't necessarily work if you need an offensive lineman, but I will say this philosophy does work in other areas of the game. But if they say, am I better allocating this first rounder or second rounder or third rounder to go get a commodity that's proven, already knows that that he can play in the league, but is not in the future plans of another team, whether it be, on a 1 year contract or 2, 3 years. Like some teams are moving off of players that early, um, for draft capital. Would it be more advantageous to be the possibility, the prospect of somebody that's a complete unknown in the league, or getting back a proven commodity that and you still have contractual control over for the next 2 to 3 years? I'm going with that. I mean, I think that Quinnen Williams is that good anyways, um, for that, and like I said, I think it was a slight overplay pay. I think that the Jets really didn't wanna get rid of Quinnen Williams, but they were like, "Really? The Cowboys are gonna give us a second and a 2027," which most scouts would say is gonna be a better class compared to the 2026 class. They're like, Man, we might just have to do that because we're not close. If we don't get the quarterback, we don't get the offensive line, like, they're not close. They have Garrett Wilson there. They have Breece Hall. We'll see if he continues to stay there. He's a free agent after the season, but they have a few weapons. But really, besides that, they don't have enough offensive weapons. They don't have the quarterback. They don't have the offensive line built up to the pedigree that it needs to be. And they just got rid of Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. Like that team's going into a rebuild mode. So it's like, do we offload Quinnen Williams for a second and a first, which is going to help us if we have to move up into a draft? We can for our quarterback, or other players to surround him. That's going to give them a lot of really good players. I don't know that they'll be in a position for blue chippers, um, but pair a couple picks together and you can get a blue chipper. There's at least one, two, about 4, 5 blue chippers in each draft. Um, this past draft, I would say there was at least 3. Ashton Genty, Mason Graham, Travis Hunter. I had Tet very high. I wouldn't necessarily call him a blue chipper, but he was very high on my board. So, those are 3 right there off the top of my head, and I haven't thought about those guys since April. So, um, Will Campbell is another one I would consider probably just fringe blue chipper as well. So, pair some picks together, go get one of those guys, and rebuild that thing up from the ground up. I really do like the trade from the Jet standpoint. I would give them an A+ on trading Quinnen Williams. Sauce Gardner won 2 first rounders mid-season for Sauce Gardner is crazy value for him. And it just makes the Michael Parsons trade from the Joneses look even worse because this is before the season even kicks off. And I know that like Sauce, I want to say Sauce is on contract as like the highest paid corner now. They just paid him, which is crazy. But um, regardless, A+ for the Quinnen Williams from the Jets perspective. From the Cowboys perspective, I will give it a B. Because it should have happened sooner. I'll just be honest. And I know maybe the Jets aren't as willing to deal 2 weeks ago as they are now. But man, it would have been so much better to have him on the team, these past few weeks versus now, especially when the Broncos completely abused you in all facets of the game. But that's neither here nor there. I would give them a B for the Cowboys, A for the Jets. As far as the Bengals, I would give them, a C. I guess it's the best that you could have got for a guy that wanted out. And for the Cowboys, very low draft capital. I'd give them an A for this trade for Logan Wilson. So those are my opinions on these trades. I'm cautiously optimistic that this Cowboys team can turn it around after a 3-5-1 start. But you know me, I'm gonna watch the games every single week. I'll be on X tweeting about it, and yeah, it is what it is. We'll get into draft season probably sooner rather than later. And with that being said, I appreciate you guys tuning into the quick show. Just had a little bit of time tonight, so I wanted to pop in and talk some Cowboys. But With that being said, thank you for tuning into the show. If you do like it, please do leave a like, comment, subscribe if you are not already. And please do consider checking out my parent network, the Grid Network. That's on YouTube, that's on X, that's on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Go check them out. They have a whole host of other shows that are really awesome, oriented towards baseball, basketball, UFC, all sorts of sports. It really is awesome, and a lot of the creators here don't have enough praise or fans. So please do consider checking them out. With that being said, peace.